Hello, we are presentation group number 3, and we are here to present grand challenge number 2 as it pertains to achieve equal opportunity and justice with a focus on fair housing and inclusive communities. Okay, before we go further into our discussion, I wanted to first open up the floor by speaking on behalf of our group. We have all agreed that housing discrimination and the pursuit of inclusive communities are vital components when it comes down to looking at matters such as social justice, economic stability, and overall community health. We believe that the access to fair housing is merely not just about the shelters that an individual has over their head, but we have to look at the bigger picture here, as this is a basic, fundamental human right that significantly influences the well-being and opportunities and resilience of all individuals. Discrimination in housing undermines these rights as they perpetuate inequality and limiting access to the essential resources for marginalized communities. So here tonight we're going to discuss the explorations of how housing discrimination reflects deeper systemic barriers and disparities. We're going to also then transition over to examine populations that are most affected by this, and we're going to end our discussion by speaking about current solutions that are aimed at promoting equity and justice for housing.
Hello, my name is Jada Washington. I'll be talking about the identification of the problem with fair housing and inclusion communities. The issue of fair housing and inclusion communities centers on ensuring equal access to housing regardless of the race, the social economy, status, gender, or other identity factors. Historically, marginalized groups have faced discrimination in the housing market, resulting in segregated neighborhoods, which limited access to resources. This lack of fair housing contributes to unequal opportunities, which impacts the education, employment, and healthcare access. The problem calls for policies and community initiatives that promotes affordable housing options, anti-discrimination enforcement, and inclusive development, fostering communities where all individuals have equitable opportunities to thrive. So like some examples are redining and neighborhood segregation. So basically another word for redining, label minority neighborhoods are at high risk, which is leading banks to deny residents mortgage access. This exclusion prevented minority communities from building wealth through house ownership, which results was lasting disinvestment, lower property values, and ongoing racial and economic segregation. Another one is discrimination. So basically landlords frequently refuse tenants who rely on housing vouchers or government assistance. This restricts low-income individuals, particularly minorities and disabled people from accesses to being safe, affordable housing. The practice reinforces segregation, limits housing options for vulnerable populations. So basically it's leading more to crimes in housing when they're in the low-income area, which equals more crime with like robbery, carjackings, and all of that stuff. Lastly is exclusionary zoning laws. Exclusionary zoning laws restricts affordable housing types like apartments, prices out lower income families by favoring wealthier residents. These laws limit economic diversity and prevent lower income families from accessing essential resources like quality schools and healthcare.
Impacts. Who is affected by this issue? The Fair Housing Act, enacted in 1968, was designed to eliminate housing discrimination and promote inclusive communities, ensuring equal access to housing for everyone, regardless of race, color, national origin, religion, sex, family status, or disability. However, despite the Act's passage, housing disparities continue to affect marginalized communities disproportionately. To understand these impacts better, let's dig into how race, gender, and other social factors influence housing inequality and how the percentages are unproportional. Starting off, we'll start with racial disparities. Race significantly impacts housing access. Historical redlining and restrictive lending practices have left Black and Latino populations at a disadvantage. A 2019 Urban Institute report found that Black home ownership at 42% compared to 73% for white Americans, with Latino home ownership at 47%. Discriminatory lending continues to affect these groups, allowing for minorities to have a less percentage of home ownership and white Americans to have the majority. Next, we have gender and housing. It comes to find that single mothers, especially women of color, whether that be Latino or Black American, African American, they face financial barriers in securing housing. Only 31% of female-headed households with children live in poverty, limiting their access to stable housing. Next is the LGBTQ+ community. The LGBTQ+ community remains vulnerable, with over 20% of same-sex couples reporting housing discrimination. The Fair Housing Act lacks explicit protection for sexual orientation and gender identity, leaving many without legal resources. Lastly is the disability and housing access. People with disabilities encounter housing discrimination and limited accessibility. 35% report discrimination, including refusal to make accommodations to disabilities, which cause them to also lack home ownership. Despite the Fair Housing Act's provision, these barriers create a clear pipeline to homelessness. Racial minorities, women, the LGBTQ+ community, and people with disabilities continue to face challenges in securing equitable housing. The intersection of race, gender, sexual orientation, and disability exacerbates these issues, perpetuating cycles of poverty and are at a greater risk of housing insecurity, perpetuating cycles of poverty and homelessness, despite legal protections.
Current solutions that can solve this issue. There are 3 levels that can help this issue. There's a federal level, state level, and there's also a local level. On the state level, there are 2 acts that they can do, which is the Fair Housing Act, which is known as the FHA, and the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, which is known as the FHEO. The FHA was enacted in 1968. The FHA prohibits discrimination in housing based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and disability. This act aims to ensure that individuals experiencing homelessness can have equal access to housing opportunities, promoting inclusive communities. The FHEO, this office oversees the enforcement of the FHA. It investigates complaints of housing discrimination and conducts outreach to educate the public about their rights. It also enhances funding and resources for the FHEO, can improve response times and the effectiveness of investigations. The state level, the state fair housing laws, many states, including North Carolina, have laws that complement the FHA by prohibiting discrimination based on additional factors such as sexual orientation and gender identity. Strengthening these laws and ensuring consistent enforcement can help combat discrimination at the state level. The housing discrimination complaint programs, the state level programs that provide resources for individuals to file complaints and seek legal assistance can empower marginalized communities. Publicizing these resources can increase awareness and access. For the local level, there's a Charlotte's Fair Housing Program. This program focuses on education and outreach to increase awareness of fair housing rights and reduce discrimination. It provides resources for individuals facing discrimination in facilities, workshops for landlords and tenants to promote understanding of fair housing laws. Durham Housing Authority. Their authorities work to ensure that housing vouchers are accepted by landlords and conducts regular training for property owners on fair housing laws. They also collaborate with local advocacy groups to enhance outreach and efforts.
Okay, so before we wrap our conversation up here, I just wanted to say that as a group collectively, we understand the importance of what it will take to achieve fair housing and fostering inclusive communities, as these are definitely essential when it comes down to addressing a matter such as housing discrimination. Moreover, this definitely undermines the rights of many marginalized groups, whether they are those of the low-income family status, racial minorities, people with disabilities, and the LGBTQ plus community members. While Fair Housing Acts, housing discrimination complaint programs, and local efforts here that are being done, whether it's in cities like Charlotte or Durham, they do help to mitigate these issues, but it is crucial to understand how program evaluation is important. Because when you evaluate the program, you get the opportunity to understand and identify gaps in research and evaluate the effectiveness of these initiatives and policies and develop more long-term suitable strategies. We know, moreover, again, as future social workers in the making, that it's going to be vital for us to advocate for policy reforms that promote inclusive communities and support community-based solutions. I believe that more than anything, together, moving forward with current social workers, we have an opportunity to dismantle or even minimize these barriers to fair housing and build more equitable communities where everyone can thrive, no matter their social status. Thank you for listening.